I'm delighted to be here and to see you all again on screen, but nevertheless, stay connected. On behalf of Alexandra and the trustees, and Andre is also here and will say a few words. I'm delighted that we're discussing climate today. We are very pleased to have amongst us today staff from our partner Louis Dreyfus Foundation. Welcome. It's great to have a joint discussion about climate. I understand that the webinar today, which we hope is one of the first of our alumni call to climate action, has grown out of the Louis Dreyfus alumni webinar that we had not long ago, it seems, still on Zoom, but I thought there was a very powerful seminar still. So it's great to see that something we've moved on and we've learned from that and realized the power of coming together using combined knowledge across different organizations and across different expertise and experience. And I hope this will show the potential that the Weidenfeld-Hoffmann Alumni Network has as a force for good. So keep the good work going, and I look forward to seeing more seminars like this in the future. And just a couple of words from my personal reflection on the topic today, looking at the topics that you have on the plan to discuss, the environmental risk and climate change, food security and biodiversity. Wow, these are all really incredibly important topics, and they're not just topical, but that they are just needed to be discussed, and they need to be discussed today, and they also require immediate action now. So let's discuss this today, and I hope that you will these topics will become essential parts to whatever role you end up undertaking, such that you can take some action and have an impact, no matter how small it is. And I will encourage you, whatever thoughts you have, and no matter how small you think you can make a difference, please be bold and try it. Good luck today. I'm looking forward to hearing what you all have to say, and I'll pass you over to, I think it's Irena and Svete, who are going to say a few words and start us off.
Thank you so much. I think Andre, would you like to say if you cover this?
Yeah, thank you very much, Alina, and thank you very much to the Trust to organize that. I have very little to say about what we're discussing today, apart from the fact that I hope to learn a lot from you. If I can just re-emphasize what Alina has just said, these situations, these fields are important. We need to do something. And how do we change a system? We change a system one step at a time. Each and individual person participating in the webinar can make a difference. And I think it's important that you should take the initiative whenever you can. Don't hesitate to take charge. People around you will be grateful. I think it's important that we emphasize that the membership of this wonderful trust has designated you as a sort of natural leader, and you must be able to make a full use of this capacity. Now, what will make the most difference in the next 5 years is, of course, something we are all concerned about, and I'm very much looking forward to listening in. So thank you for organizing that. Thank you, Jane, and back to our first speaker.
Today is going to be all about discussing actions to tackle climate change, as the title says. So two of the two speakers will lead with their own answer to the key question that Andrew just reminded us of. So what is going to matter most in the very near future? Irena from a slightly more entrepreneurial perspective, and Sveta from a more policy perspective. But this is not, and this is what we'd like to highlight, right from the beginning, this is not just about them. In the second half of this webinar, we also want to hear from each one of you, whether the proposed climate actions should be the focus of the next 5 years, and what else should be prioritized. We want to gather your perspectives, whether you are actually working in the area or not. And throughout the webinar, please drop your comments, notes, questions, or critiques in the bigger board that we have prepared. I will copy and paste it in the chat again. And I will ask Maggie to just share the screen to just show what it looks like. So we've prepared just this kind of like an empty, bare bone board. You feel free to drop your notes anywhere. You can add the notes simply by clicking On the left, you see on the left menu, there's like sticky notes option, and you can add your notes just like I'm doing. But if you struggle to use this, or if your devices, it doesn't allow you to use this board, feel free to, just use the Zoom chat as you would normally. I would go around the chat and copy over the notes that's, the comments and questions that I find. So that's it. So yeah, at the end of the webinar, which will be just under an hour long, do not rush off. We have prepared 2 networking sessions to give you all a chance to, interact professionally, exchange contacts or renew contacts, find out what other people are doing. Some of you have already signed up for to pitch some ideas or some projects or positions. And after those, there will be space for everyone else also to it's not close, so you will have several time to pitch something or to engage with what others are proposing or sharing. I think we're now ready to start with the first speaker, which would be Irena Fedorenko. Irena graduated from the DPhil in Geography and Environment in 2016 and is a serial climate entrepreneur. So the companies she co-founded include Kindness Collective, which is a brand of sustainable laundry detergent, Flying Forest, a tree planting drone company, and Velinda Climate, which is a blockchain-based platform that is focused on providing capital to ecosystem and restoration projects. So again, I will take us to our own answers to our overarching question for the next 10 minutes or less, and we would have some time for questions after that. So as Irena is speaking, feel free to either add notes on the Miro board or drop your question to Irena, specifically to Irena in the Zoom chat, and we will get to that after our presentation.
Thank you, Temi. Hello, everyone. Very nice to see you virtually. And I'm very happy to talk to you today and to learn also about all your initiatives and passions for climate. My journey into climate entrepreneurship started when I was very young and when I was working in Vladivostok, and I got really engaged in the WWF Russia project to protect tigers and leopards. And at that time, I really thought that only impact that I make with my own hands, only the trees that I plant with my own hands matters. And I believed in the power of small actions, and I still believe in the power of small actions, but I couldn't imagine how many people we would need to actually protect the forest or save the tigers. And because I experienced how hard it was, I just couldn't even see how we can scale this. And when you work on your little isolated piece of land or isolated piece of wild forest, and you see how long it takes, what hard of a job it is to restore the forest or to clean it up, you can become really pessimistic and you can really despair and just stop believing that you can actually make a difference. Luckily for me, I got engaged in international conferences and networking, and I met people across the world who were doing very similar type of work and who were like me. And when I started looking outwards and when I started connecting to other young people making difference, I got my optimism back, and I saw that actually we are not isolated and we are located all over the world. And together we can do this butterfly effect with small actions in different places. We can really tip the situation and help to prevent climate change, or at least mitigate the worst consequences of climate change. So obviously, thanks to Weidenfeld-Hoffmann scholarship, I was able to go to Oxford to do my PhD, and then also to switch to entrepreneurship, because on my journey, I've always been committed to land restoration. I've always been committed to climate activism. but I couldn't quite find the best way to address it. And being in Oxford and being a part of this amazing cohort allowed me to experiment and launch different projects and create products. Now I'm very happy to share the initiative that is drawing on my experience of working with the communities, addressing the issue of reforestation and conservation, but at the same time addressing the more larger social issues that are all connected to the environment. As you know, environmental degradation doesn't only affect actual natural environment, it affects people who depend on it, and it can lead to conflict. It can lead to migration, it can lead to wars, but at the same time, environmental restoration can also lead to peace building. And if we do the good, well thought out, deep projects that address not only the biological side of the problem, but also the social side, and that not only plant trees or restore aquifers, but actually provide jobs to people who live there and incentivize people who live there, that we can really change the situation. So that was that idea. I started with my co-founders the project that we call Vlinda, which I showed to you. And Vlinda is a, it means butterfly in Dutch, and that means that we believe in butterfly effect. Vlinda focuses on the problem of mangrove degradation. You know that mangroves are climate eco-heroes. They sequester carbon 3 to 5 times higher than other forests. And besides carbon sequestration, they also filter water, provide increased fisheries. They can create ecotourism opportunities, and they can protect corals and also create work for people who live around mangrove forests. However, mangrove forests are being degraded, and every year by losing mangrove forests, we get as much emissions as the annual emissions of Australia. So that's a really concerning number, and that's why we started Vlinda to counter this trend and to enable mangrove restoration. So how do we enable mangrove restoration worldwide on a global scale? First of all, because we believe in butterfly effect, we believe in the power of the small. So we work with communities and we find eco-heroes, local, young, or not necessarily young, but motivated people around the world who want to protect their ecosystems. And then we match them with investors and channel capitals into these projects. And in order to enable that, we use carbon finance and tokenized based biomass verification system to ensure transparency and trust in the project. So I just returned from Kenya, where I met local women with who are actually local eco-heroes who protect their forests, who plant the mangroves, and you can imagine they don't earn a lot of money from it. We discussed how it is best to protect the forests and how we can empower them to not only plant, but also to keep up the forest standing. So we came up with the following proposition, that we will deploy carbon credit financial model of which 50% of the carbon revenue will go to the project. And because the carbon is being verified every year, so every year the community will be paid a little part of the carbon revenue for keeping the forest standing. And obviously mangrove forests, they address a lot of sustainable development goals. So along with the actual tree planting jobs, there will be also other co-benefits provided, and things like fisheries, oyster farming, butterfly farming, and solar-powered cook stoves to enable people to just change the economy. And so these are some pictures from the Kenya project and the numbers that are committed to the project. So we are going to restore around 2,000 hectares and address 9 SDGs. And the second project we have in the pipeline is Myanmar, which we're already supporting, and we are protecting and replanting 3,500 hectares there, also addressing 9 SDGs. And you can imagine that with the situation in Myanmar right now, this job becomes even more hard, but even more necessary, because people who live in the coastal areas, they really need these work opportunities and livelihood opportunities, and that this scheme can enable them to access that. How do we verify impact? Because it's one thing to show you beautiful pictures and to say that we planted 1 million trees, but how do you actually know what happens, and how do you actually know how much carbon is being stored? So we are using drones and remote sensing to map every single tree and to validate it year on year. And we also using the LiDAR scanner to check how much carbon is being accumulated every year. So this will use the AI and machine learning to make this work automated. So you as a donor, you can see your 5 trees, you can name them, you can tag them, and you can monitor their progress every year, and you can basically calculate how much carbon you produce and how many trees you need to grow to offset your carbon footprint. And that will be equally easy to do for yourself as an individual, but also for a small, medium business or for a huge corporation. And I think that's a very big problem right now. It's just transparency and trust in the sector, and we use technology to solve those 2 big problems. And you can have a really nice app when you can buy these tokens, or you can invest in the project, or you can offset your carbon footprint through the app. So we make it as user-friendly as possible. And for larger companies, we are building the exchange platform where each company can offset their footprint, or the NGO can offset the footprint, and again, do it in a transparent manner to avoid the questions of double counting, to avoid the questions of impact, because this is all data-driven and this is all verified. And obviously in the future, we want to make it even more digitalized. But obviously, and add other projects. So we have Panama in the pipeline, Mexico, and the Russian tundra, and also refine the verification system to make it very easy, very user-friendly, and very trustworthy for everyone to invest in forest restoration, because we really believe that mangroves are the climate eco-heroes, but it's actual people in the middle, and people who depend on these ecosystems, they should be the ones who receive the benefits, and they should be the ecosystem stewards. So that's the decision that, the solution that we've been working on, and I just had to share it with you guys, and I'm looking forward to your question and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irena, for sharing that and for your time. We will allow for a couple minutes at this point for anyone to raise a question specifically to Irena's projects. So it's a to just summarize it, to understand it's a very digital platform to collect and coordinate individual action and match it with potentially large scale financing.
Yeah, I see a couple of questions.
Yes.
Very short answer, basically through technology, because on these villages you may not have infrastructure, you may not have even canalization, but you would have a small solar battery and smartphones. So people who live there and plant trees, they all have a smartphone, and there is already a special app developed for farmers where they can plant, verify that they planted, and get payment. So for example, in Kenya, it's M-Pesa, so it's a very efficient mobile payment system where every woman who works with us, however many 3-shift plans, she gets paid through that system very transparently. So that's just another use of innovation and technology to make that transparent and to make sure that the money actually goes to these women and they get the part of benefit sharing. And I see another question on certification.
So just let me read the question out loud in case people are not seeing it. So question from Vivishika, who says, I am researching the voluntary carbon markets and trying to help certify an agroforestry project in Ethiopia. Do certifications only happen in the design phase or also after plantation phases? So how will the project be different with other species of plants who were planted?
Yeah, so that there are different standards. So we work with leaders. So there's Vera voluntary carbon certification standard, and there's also gold standard, and there's Plan Vivo. So those are kind of 3 top that we work with. Vera would have the agroforestry standard that will probably work well for you. And before you would need to first do the project, wait for 5 years, and only then call the verifiers. But right now, a lot of innovation is happening on the space. So right now, I actually recommend calling the verifiers, so getting in touch with the verifiers in the design stage, because you can get a pre-approval already in a design stage. And obviously that gives you more confidence and that gives you more certainty on how much carbon you can expect. So you should look at the agroforestry standard within Vera and try to design it from the beginning.
All right, I think I see another question has popped in, but I think we will move on for now.
So can I quickly answer this? Because there's a question from Maria. How did I establish the contact with communities? And that's through WHT Alumni Network. That's a critical question. So use an alumni.
So keep your questions for so we will keep all of them. We will get back to those later, but I think we want to give an opportunity for Sveta as well to make a presentation with the same amount of time. So Sveta will be our second speaker for today. She graduated from the DPhil in politics in 2011 and is currently focusing on sustainable investments, which actually relates a lot to what Irena has just told us. She is the ESG Research Director at Arabesque, and where she helps develop database and AI solutions for investors, legislators, and companies, enabling them to integrate ESG metric into decision making. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Tammy, and thank you, everybody. Thank you to the Weidenfeld-Hoffmann Trust and alumni for the invitation. It's always great to join scholars and alumni and speak. I was just thinking earlier today of the previous times over the past decade, more than a decade, that I've been part of this network, that I've spoken to scholars and alumni. And, we have discussed many different topics, from human rights, conflict resolution, to the changing of capitalism, and now climate. And it's always been the most exciting audience to talk to and always get the most challenging questions. So I'm really looking forward to today's discussion and today's event. I should start first by kind of prefacing my intervention with saying that I am a recent joiner to the sustainability and climate industry. My journey, unlike Irena's, was actually not as straightforward. I graduated, as you've heard, with a doctorate in politics, and over the past decade, I have been mostly working with investors and corporates to advise them on political risk, on regulatory issues, focusing on the challenges in different markets, but over the past years, a lot of the questions I started getting from my clients, whether they were, investors, investment funds, or private equity, or with corporates, whether it's big pharma or extractives, oil and gas, started kind of falling more within the ESG and the kind of climate related areas. Even traditional oil and gas companies would come to us with question about, what do you know about, carbon sequestration? Are the governments going to impose these and that types of regulations? Or, your big food and beverage kind of companies asking about their, with huge supply chains globally, asking about different countries' plans for their own ESG due diligence and so on. So I figured if you really want to make an impact in this area, you really have to work with the companies, with the investors, and help bring that change about, which is why I guess like many people across the world over the past year, over the lockdown, I have been reassessing also where my career is going and decided to make the move from political risk into sustainability and sustainable investment. And that is how I ended up with Arabesque, which is, well, it's a scale up. It's really not a startup anymore, but that is what its proposition is really, to help bring about sustainable investment, to harness the power of capital, to bring about sustainability. And I have not prepared a very exciting slide. There's very little exciting to show in the kind of numbers and big data sets, unlike trips to Kenya, but I do have a couple of things I want to share. So I just chose these 3 facts, and it really takes about 5 minutes of research to come up with numbers like this. So you see, these numbers are being published by some of the kind of biggest global organizations and actors in this area about the amount, the sheer kind of scale of investment that is required for the world to reach its climate-related targets. So, 2.4 trillion of annual investment only in the energy systems is required until 2035 to limit temperature rise before 1.5 degrees from pre-industrial levels, and then $5 to $7 trillion a year to be invested to achieve SDGs worldwide until 2030, or the last number, which is $6.3 trillion of infrastructure investment to meet development goals, a number that would be higher if these were going to be compatible with the goals of the Paris Agreement. And so you can interpret these numbers in many ways, obviously, as every fact and every data can be interpreted. But the reason I put these to you today is, to say, just try to imagine the scale of investment that is required if we are globally going to try and reach the targets that are required to kind of keep temperature rises, the overall kind of climate commitments to that within the Paris Agreement. It's huge. And for me, what is obvious from here is that these targets cannot be achieved, cannot be reached only through government action only, or international organizations' actions only, or even if somehow we manage to change behaviors at the population, at the grassroots level. What this really requires is a serious action and commitment of the investors, of the big asset owners, big asset managers who have and manage trillions of dollars. And if those assets are harnessed, if that capital is available and is used to encourage transition to a green economy, or overall focused investment on SDG friendly goals, then that could really have significant impact. And the reason that these years, the numbers there, 2030, 2035, are included is because to demonstrate how urgent this is. Action is needed right now. If these targets are going to be met, if that capital is going to be harnessed in a climate-friendly way, we need to be acting now. So that is why I have decided to focus on working with investors and enabling sustainable investment. So if we move to the bottom you can see how we do it. And it's a simple proposition. Well, it sounds simple, which is very difficult to implement in practice. But what is needed to help investors put capital, invest in companies and projects that are going to help rather than detract from reaching climate or other development related goals. So we do this in two ways. First one is to use academic research and create tools or solutions that investors can use. Investors already use quite a lot of research in kind of deciding how to invest. Obviously, a lot of that is financial data and related to how these assets are going to perform and their portfolios are going to perform over time. But over the past few years, there's been a really substantial growth in using alternative non-financial data and translating all that we know about greenhouse emissions or other climate-related research out there and translating that into something that is applicable, something that investors can use, because there is a big gap there between the latest climate-related research and to what investors have available as a tool to use in their decision making. So we use academic research, a big team of researchers who come, much like a lot of you with their PhDs, with their research projects on climate-related topics, and use that to create solutions that are easy to use for investors. Scores, for example, for some of them, the top say 7 or 8 or 10,000 listed companies, and scoring them on different metrics related to environment, to social goals, to government, to all the ESG metrics. Preference filters for different investors looking to invest, in some green companies or looking to invest in responsible companies in other ways, whether they have some regional preferences or other ideological, even religious preferences to allow for that. And risk indicators. These are all sorts of tools that investors tend to use. And if we make them climate friendly and align them with the latest research, it's going to allow them to use that and to make their decisions aligned to climate goals. The second aspect of it is gathering non-financial data on company performance. And this is, I'll just wrap up here. But basically, investors use a lot of data, a lot of it being financial. But there is a case for arguing that materiality, that there are non-financial material aspects of companies' performance. So not to bore you with financial vocabulary, but the financial performance of companies also depends on non-financial aspects, such as their environmental or social or governance performance. So gathering this data, making it available, making it transparent, validating it, and making it available for corporates as well as for investors to consult is one step to making it easier for investors to understand and choose and decide how to invest in environmentally and overall socially responsible investment projects. So I'll stop there because I was alerted that my time is up, but I'm quite keen to hear your thoughts and answer your questions on this.
Thank you so much, Sveta. You gave us a very kind of, as I say, straightforward but also difficult answer. So we need a lot of money, and we need to convince the people who have it to spend it on climate action. So we'll allow 2 or 3 minutes for questions to come up at this point in time. Bivishka, would you like to ask your question on camera?
I would love to. Thank you so much, Sveti. That was really insightful. But what I also wanted to hear your thoughts on was, are companies and investors actually using a social justice narrative to measure the impacts of climate change, and henceforth, use that to determine a company's emissions, etc., and then guide their green and sustainable actions? So I just wanted to hear a little bit more on that.
Companies use a lot of narratives, and part of the data that we collect comes from their annual reports or their special sustainability reports and so on. And through that, you can identify a lot of the the narratives that are used, the logic, and so on. At the aggregate level, obviously, we do not necessarily focus on that when gathering the data. But for someone who would be looking to understand that as a research project, that would certainly be, one of the things that you can try and isolate from this. What we do when looking for data is, rather than these narratives, there are international frameworks that are related to, I will again not bore you with the financial kind of details and acronyms, but corporations and investors are required to disclose data about their portfolios or about their performance. So we follow these frameworks rather than a specific kind of research derived narrative about what we should look at when we're trying to gather data. So companies report on these frameworks requirements, and we gather that data and see what and how much they report and how well they're aligned with these frameworks. But if you would be interested to look at the annual reporting, stability reporting, there's quite a lot of interesting things to identify and pick up there.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. We have a question from Mahin.
Yeah, sure. Hi, thanks. Thanks for the presentation. And actually, your last slide was really resonating with me because I work as a consultant with EY's Climate Change and Sustainability Department, and my specialization is actually in outcomes measurement, non-financial impact outcomes measurement. And what I've seen in the market, both in the Middle East and now in Canada, is that even when companies are asking to measure impact, it tends to be, the ready-made metrics that you have in sustainability standards, so whether that's GRI or more recently the World Economic Forum's metrics. But I'm interested in knowing, in your experience, do you see investors becoming more mature and asking for more customized impact assessment frameworks?
Yes and no is the short answer to that. Yes, to the extent that, like you, I've also kind of advised investors previously on specific transactions. And part of that is ESG due diligence. And when that is the case, you do go into much greater detail and into understanding the impacts, into understanding the specific targeted asset that is under consideration, and then you produce a much more detailed report. And there's a whole industry, which you will know very well, that is focused exactly on kind of servicing these needs of some of the financial market players there. At the kind of general level, though, I think there is still such a big gap in gathering the data, the raw data, against each of the frameworks that say a big asset manager with portfolios of hundreds of holdings isn't, I don't think anytime soon likely to be demanding any more detailed impact assessments on them. Potentially, but for the time being, the requirements, especially if you focus on Europe, say, right, the European Union has published its EU taxonomy, is going to enter into force soon and so on. A lot of the focus is on actually just reporting on metrics rather than diving deeper into the details. There is a lot of still uncertainty as to how the actual impact, the PAIs of the European Union are going to be interpreted, but I can't see that at this stage there is the readiness or even the capacity to go in depth. I think for the time being they'll stay kind of enclosed within these transactional due diligence processes, and potentially once investors are more comfortable with framework reporting or taxonomy reporting, we can move on maybe to integrating more reports.
Thanks. I have more questions, but I'll stop for now.
Thank you, Mahina, and thank you, Sveta, for your contribution. Next, we are going to move, we'll continue the conversation with an open session, which Bivishka will lead. So feel free, keep adding your contributions, ideas, projects, about things that we've already talked about, but also things that we've not talked about in the chat and on the Miro board. I will now, give space to Bivishka.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for contributing so far on the Miro board. My name is Divishika Bandari. I'm from Nepal. I'm a Louis Dreyfus and Weidenfeld-Hoffmann scholar who just graduated in the pandemic year of 2020 with an MSc in Nature, Society, and Environmental Governance. And I'm quite interested to work in the nexus of women's empowerment and the social dimensions of climate change. So I know that it is not just me, but then the larger Weidenfeld-Hoffmann scholars from all around the world have been at the forefront of climate actions in our respective communities. And in today's interactive webinar, it is an opportunity for us alumni to come together to share our innovative ideas and to co-learn and also form collaborations for a sustained and just climate action. We heard from two incredible scholars about their climate actions, and now we want to hear from you. So particularly in this next session, we will focus on collaborative recommendation drafting, which will be collected in the form of a report to be shared as thoughts and ideas and discussions that WHT alumni have gathered to be used in the future climate action events. So how will we do this? We'll do this in two ways. I'll guide you with a simple question. You will have 2 minutes to type in your responses in the Miro board. The link to the Miro board has been shared in the chat box. Once I ask you the question, you'll have 2 minutes to write your answers. And after the 2 minutes, I will also open the floor to participants who are willing to share their thoughts verbally and their solutions verbally. You will indicate this by raising your hand on Zoom. I hope it is clear. So only two things. I'm going to ask you a question, and I would like to now direct everybody to go to the Miro board. In case Miro board doesn't work on your laptop, on your computer, then please feel free to use the Zoom chat box to type in your responses. It is quite easy to use the Miro board. All you need to do is drag in the sticky note and drop in the text there. So the question for everyone is, for your region and community, what climate actions that you are currently taking or are part of will make the most difference in the next 5 years? I will repeat the question again. So based on your region and your community, what climate action that you are taking or that you're part of will make the most difference in the next 5 years? So it can be policy making, it can be enterprises that you've been part of, researches. We would like to hear that, and your time starts now. Great. I see a lot of interaction in the Miro board, and it looks quite colorful and also amazing ideas. Please definitely keep adding to the Miro board as well. What I'd like to do now is I see that there are a lot of different ideas, from collaborations with governments to behavioral change to working on rural enterprises to understanding migration issues and sustainable businesses, a lot of different ideas. But what I'd like to hear now is, how are you working on these solutions? These are, you've mentioned in general solutions, right? But we'd like to hear very specifically how you're working on this. So I'd like to open the floor to participants who would like to share their ideas. And I already see, I think, Sagar is also, would you like to share your thoughts and your ideas? I see that you've just commented.
Yeah, hi.
The floor is open.
Yeah, thank you, Bibistika. So what I'm doing currently is like I'm working in one of the remote part. This is a part of like a support to the community level. So what we can see globally is basically in most of the majority cities, there is a concrete problem. Almost all of the buildings or construction activities, whatever they are going on, they are made of concrete. And what's happening in Nepal is, like if you see Kathmandu or Pokhara, majority of the cities, like in the past 20 years, they have completely changed their architectures. So what has happened is almost all the buildings, they have been constructed from the concrete. Previously, which used to be built from the local materials, local human resources and everything. So what I could see is like Pokhara, it's the most tourist destination. So, but in recent days, you cannot see anything local there. So it has been a part of the global problem. So we can see in the remote part of the Nepal as well, like this problem is slowly spreading. So what we are trying to do is to preserve the cultural traditions, houses. Basically, in this phase, we are working mostly on the house. So we can see the concrete structures slowly being built in the remote Himalayan regions as well. So recently today also, we had a meeting with the president, like the locally elected governments and all, what we can do for this. So what we are doing is we are trying to research on the traditional houses and traditional human resources and all, and we are trying to preserve it. So definitely there are some limitations to the traditional houses, like they are not earthquake resistant, and also there are some aesthetic problems, and people are sometimes like rodents and all. But what we are trying to do is we are trying to address these limitations of the traditional houses, and we are proposing them the new traditional houses that are climate resilient, that are strong, that are earthquake resistant and all. So what this will do is this will at least utilize the local resources and utilize the local human resources, and also regarding the cost, from the cost aspect as well, it is very cheap compared to the concrete houses, you know. So you can see like the concrete house, it is the major one of the major reason for climate change and all these things. So if we are able to work in a remote part with a more community awareness activities, I think this will have a big impact. Like we need to work on the roots. So what I'm trying to do is, rather than a top-down approach, I'm trying to go is like a bottom-up approach. So this is one village we are working on. So we have planned to, if this works very well, if this awareness activities works with 10,000 local people, then we will expand it to the maybe next district level, and then we'll go to the national level, and then maybe we can go in international level as well. So yeah, that is what I'm doing on. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sagar. Really, sustainable housing and sustainable construction is definitely a priority in rapidly urbanizing spaces, which is also a big contributor to impacts of climate change. So hopefully you'll also have collaborators who are interested to work with you, and we will carry the conversation for collaborations also in our networking session. Next, I'd like to have Prerna, who raised your hand. The floor is yours. Would you like to share your ideas and thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much, Bhavishka. So I wrote about the need for skills development for a just transition. That comes from 2 points that I'm working on. One is my internship with the CDC group, on which I am actually working on a working paper document in collaboration with the FCDO, which specifically researches on the business case for investing in just transition. And Mr. Hoffmann, thank you so much for the Capitals Coalition. I will definitely be taking inputs from those. The second is my social enterprise, Jiva, thanks to the WHT Enterprise Challenge, which motivated me to make it a reality. So Jiva is basically a clean tech lithium-ion powered battery solution, which is focused on street vendors to move them from using fossil fuel-based energy solutions to a cleaner energy alternative. And the entire transition needs emphasis and investment, both in terms of effort and finance for skill development towards the movement.
Thank you so much, Prerna. Definitely energy, also another big sector that we need to work on. And I hope that you two will find collaborators in the networking session to work with you. If there are collaborators, and if you would also like to share your thoughts on what Prerna and Sagar have shared so far, please also definitely raise your hand, and you'll have the floor next. Now I see we have Taf, who would also like to share. Taf, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bhavishka. I think another important sector, at least for me, is the transport sector. And how I'm working on this is that some friends and I started a last mile delivery company that prioritizes the use of sustainable vehicles. So right now we're looking at lightweight things using electric motorcycles. And the idea is to find a way to introduce sustainable delivery as an important feature into e-commerce in Zimbabwe and Southern Africa in general.
Thank you so much. These are great ideas, Taf. And if you'd like to share a bit more on your ideas in the networking session, definitely feel free to do so. I'd like to give the floor to as many scholars as possible so that we can explore future collaborations. Next, we have Tanya. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Bhavishka. Hello, everyone. My name is Tanya. I am a WST scholar and also a Louis Dreyfus scholar. Recently, I finished my master's in environmental change and management. I'm back in Peru, in my home country, and I just started a new position in Transparency International as an environmental governance specialist. And what I've been researching so far is the link between corruption and the lack of transparent processes of logging in local and regional areas of Peru. There are various sources of climate funds coming to Peru, such as the REDLAS. And these are being managed by the central and national government. But the problem is that they are losing sight of what's actually happening at the local and regional levels. There is not enough transparency about how the communities or sometimes the logging enterprises are actually using the forests. And this is something that we are trying to convince the government to use this kind of approach along all the climate actions that they are using in the country. And right now I am working on the update of the national strategy of climate change. And so it is a power dynamic to trying to convey that this is a core idea and we need to address it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Tanya. it's always challenging to work in the local level, and we don't always see the work translated. Hopefully you'll get to also discuss some of these challenges with other alumni in the networking session. But right before the networking session, we'll have one more alumni. We have Cedric who raised a hand, and I also see Banu. So after Cedric, we'll have Banu, and then we'll close the floor for now.
Thank you very much, Bhavishika, and thanks to Mr. Andre Hoffman and the WHT for the opportunity to have done my master's at Oxford. I'm now working as a doctoral researcher at the University of Greenwich. And one of my contributions towards climate change is an important issue of how we maintain ecosystem services, which by their own natural ways combat climate change. This climate change is human-driven. So I'm working with farmers on the slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. They typically manage their field margins, which are usually natural. So they manage them differently. They cut them back to feed livestock. They burn them. Sometimes they eliminate them and cultivate in them. And this is because they see these field margins as a refuge for pests. But the problem is that field margins contain flowers and other vegetation, which have nectar and pollen and attract bees. And bees bring about pollination services, which increase the yields and which are important for maintaining yields for what we get. So there's a knowledge gap, obviously, in terms of how much these practices affect yields. So I'm doing work on looking at that, on how it affects yields and biodiversity and livelihoods and etc. So I'm doing this through field studies, going out into the ground, and also through GIS, with the aim of building a model that will be used to see how different models of management will affect the livelihoods through yields and the biodiversity and etc. And ultimately, we want to come up with optimal ways of managing field margins and the wider landscape in a way that will enable nature to help us overcome these effects of climate change.
Great, thank you so much, Cedric. Addressing the impacts of climate change, you always have to look at interconnected issues for sure. And impacts on livelihoods is something quite tied to community and community building as well. Hopefully this conversation will carry forward in the networking session as well. And finally, we have Banu, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, I am a WHT scholar from 2020. I did a master's in evidence-based social intervention policy evaluation. I'm sort of reiterating the point that Bhavishka just made. In summary, I looked at what Prerna said, what Cedric just said, what Taf mentioned. I think these were points that I had in mind as well. One of the things that I have observed working in the space of social entrepreneurship is if we have these larger objectives about energy and climate change, I think we need to find intersectionality of where we could also find economic value that is delivered to multiple parties, whether if you look at skill development and street hawkers or street vendors, for example, there is an opportunity there. Energy consumption, while it's a good thing for us to do, but what is the economic value that we can actually deliver to the street hawkers? Where do they see value? Only then will we be able to, and then for that economic value to be delivered, there may be a skill development necessary there. We're looking at something what Irena talked about. We're doing something there. We can use AI and machine learning for scanning, doing drone-based scanning and understanding a green cover. But then how about introducing a rural entrepreneurship model on the platform where if we could democratize the way we could do a social audit and then give this tools and resources to the rural population, could they earn a livelihood from the same process that a machine could do? So there are opportunities for us to find intersectionality with livelihood so that we could optimize the use of technology, we could achieve our objectives on the climate and energy, but at the same time, we could also make it beneficial for the community to get engaged. I think that is the only way in which we will address the financial burden that is there, because it's going to be huge, as we saw earlier, it's going to be in trillions of dollars. Unless we find the intersectionality, it's not going to be sustainable.
Great point there, Banu. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your thoughts and your ideas. I also see that our Miro board is definitely filled with different ideas, different solutions. And what we will do next is gather all these ideas and solutions and put it in a form of a report as the voices of Weidenfeld-Hoffmann scholars in how they foresee addressing the impacts of climate change. And we will also share this in the form of a report. The next one will, you will be able to see it in our next annual report as well. To quickly summarize our discussion and what we see in the Miro board, I hand the floor over to Temi.
Thank you, Bevishika. Yeah, so it's been very interesting, yeah, and we really appreciate all the contributions that have been made. I've started kind of like organizing the notes that I see on the board to identify some of the clusters. I was not able to finish all of it during this conversation, but so far I see right in the top left corner, which are sort of meant for actions that target specifically nature, the health of nature itself. And starting from like a small scale or individual scale, we see, actions that go towards like a better use of land, starting from like promoting urban gardens, reducing land use, and to stop deforestation. And reducing land use can be done, with smart agriculture, investing in smart agriculture to increase productivity. But also working on, set mandates. So this is, on an individual or business level, set policies and set rules that really force businesses and land owners to implement business practices that have a positive impact on the environment, and in general, increasing the level of education and the level of measurements, especially over the outcomes. And a similar discussion, of course, can be done for water. I see someone has specifically raised the issue of the difficulties of water ecosystem in Southern Africa. There's also like a big issue with water scarcity there. Towards the middle, right, between like the individual actions and the global actions, we have these comments that really tries to change what is the philosophy of how do we approach nature, how do we understand nature, how do we, how can we look at it not purely as a resource, and how to then feed, continue towards like a larger and larger scale, how do we feed this understanding into, policy action at a national level, but also at an international level, and how do we, feed this understanding into business practices that through maybe a butterfly effect or systemic effect that can achieve the effect that we want. And similarly, so these are kind of like the upper half meant to target actions that are specifically, that target directly what's at nature and its interface. Whereas the bottom half, which is, as rich or even richer, targets society, society change and society resilience, starting with, just taking into account the fact that climate change has already affected certain population, has already caused migration, and this is something that we will have to account for, going forward. We know that it's coming, so we should prepare for it. But also, there's an interesting comment about creating commercial markets that solve the problem, right? So we have capitalism has certain effects on, the way it is implemented in our, in where we live, has certain effects on our, on nature and society. So can we create a market where, the more activity the market has, the better it is for us? And, many more, issues like journalism as was raised as well. How do we write? How do we make information? And how do we communicate change and problems to people in a way that is maybe neither too alarmistic, nor too maybe too blind? And generally speaking, how do we, here in the middle, we have many comments about like behavioral change of citizens, of companies, of communities. And on a more global scale, then we have what we have talked about a lot in this session, which is, carbon markets, impact assessments and creating policies that strengthen what we call green financing and decarbonization. So we will write all this up in a nicer form and share with you with the annual reports, which I imagine you will get towards the end of June or in July. And yeah, so if you feel free to keep this link, the MigoPod will be accessible even after the end of this session. So if you want to come back, recall things or hard notes, please do. And for now, maybe I'll pass back to Jane. Do we have a should we start the networking session? Okay, yeah. So you have been assigned, depending on what you have indicated to us, you have already been assigned to one of 2 rooms, which Maggie will start shortly. If you made a wrong choice, or if you want to change your room, feel free to send us a message if you cannot move rooms by yourselves. So as I said in the beginning, some of you have already indicated that they want to pitch some ideas. So just raise your hands and the moderators in each room will call you, or even if you've not indicated that previously, feel free to just raise your hand again and we will try to give you time to speak. So we imagine this will go for about 15 minutes, possibly more, but not much more than that. So thank you all, and yeah, this is not goodbye. We'll see you in the networking sessions.
So Jane, if you can hear me, sadly I must go, but great. I mean, really, really enjoyed it. Keep it coming, keep it coming. See you soon. Bye-bye.